Welcome to this session, which we will explore the topic of football as a vehicle for change. Now, my name is Jason Webber. I'm the Senior Equality, Diversity, Inclusion and Sustainability Manager at the Football Association of Wales, and I'll be your host for this panel discussion. We have some fantastic guests for this session, and I'm delighted to introduce them. Our first guest is Dean Pimble. Now, Dean is a campaign manager for Wales at Show Racism the Red Card. Now, Dean's work has focused on addressing racial equality through the education system, sport, and within the workplace. Dean works with staff at all levels of the organisation, including board and committee members, to create a positive, anti-racist learning and working environments where racial equality is at the heart of their decision-making process. Welcome to this session, Dean.
Welcome,
Second, we have Daniel Townley. Now, Daniel's worked for Level Playing Field for 5 years, supporting the clubs to improve their access and inclusion for disabled sports fans. Now, he works closely with disability officers from clubs across several sports, offering advice and guidance around a range of accessibility-related topics. Welcome to the session, Daniel.
Thank you.
Next is Sandy Abielis. Now, Sandy is the Women's Football Officer at Amnesty International UK. Sandy brings the world of human rights and football together, specifically focusing on refugee women and girls. Now, Sandy's an ex-footballer. She's got vast experience within the football industry to share with us tonight, having previously also worked at Fulham Football Club Foundation. So welcome to this session, Sandy. Brilliant. And last but not least is Lou Inglefield. Now, Lou is returning to the Clwb PAWB Summit again this year. Lou is a leading LGBTQ+ sports rights activist. She has been a trusted voice on LGBTQ inclusion in sport and physical activity for more than 20 years. Lou presents and speaks on issues of LGBTQ+ inclusion in sport and physical activity globally, and has ensured that Football versus Homophobia has become a leading authority on LGBTQ inclusion in football at the forefront of insight of policy and practice. So Lou, welcome to the session.
Oh, thanks for having me along, Jason.
So how this is going to work, we've got some questions and a discussion that we're going to go through with our panel of guests this evening as the first part. Now, for those that are listening in, you will have the opportunity to ask some questions at the end of the session to our panelists. So again, using the features at the bottom in the Q&A feature, put any questions in there that you'll have, and we'll have some time at the end then to go through some of those questions for our panelists to answer as well. So we'll kick off with the first discussion question. So tonight we're very much looking on football as a vehicle for social change. So how can we use football, or how is football used to bring about societal change on some of the key issues? Now, we have guests from many different specific areas of human rights, of different sort of equality issues and challenges. But we'll kick off with, why then is football a good vehicle for bringing about social change? Sandy, do you want to kick us off with sharing your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'll jump in, and it's kind of a short and sweet-ish answer, but I guess what I will say is that football is at the heart of many different communities, right? And it can bring people together. I would say arguably no other activity can. Like, nothing is like football. Of course, we've got like other sports, but nothing is like football. It's a universal language. Like, you don't need to be able to speak English or be able to speak the local language to be able to understand the game, which is definitely an amazing part of it, because it is literally its own language, right? So yeah, I feel it's a very powerful tool to be able to just bring people together, create more welcoming communities, and yeah, create positive social change through it.
And Dean, obviously, Show Red Card very much uses football as a tool for tackling racism, both with young people predominantly, but also adults, but within schools and within sport itself. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I know, bringing people together is great. They can bring people together from a variety of backgrounds, and it's a global sport that people are able to enjoy, from whether that be taking part in sport, watching sport, volunteering, coaching. So there's lots of different opportunities that brings people together, and large groups of people. So using football and the brand and power of football to really impact people's lives positively is really important. And I think, you know, if you're 2 years old or 92 years old, there's a format of the game that people can be engaged in. And I think that's unlike a lot of other activities where, you know, that intergenerational combined feeling coming together to enjoy football is really key, and that's why it's so important that we use football for social good, and to tackle inequalities, but certainly bring about social change. And, you know, people love to watch, whether they be their club, whether it be their nation, young people inspiring to be like that positive role model they see on that pitch. And I think using those positive role models then to share a positive message, if that's the anti-racism message, on kind of my campaign, is really key, because young people aspire to be like those role models on the pitch, and it can really bring about change working with large groups of people as well.
Lou, I suppose similarly with yourself, with the Football versus Homophobia campaign, you know, how much does it also, you know, impact within the game, but the impact, seeing that the work that's done with the campaign has an impact on society as well?
Yeah, I think, you know, at Football versus Homophobia, we say we're here to kind of like challenge sort of discrimination against LGBTQ plus people in the game, but also to use the game as a vehicle for change. And so, for example, you know, football enables us to go into schools, to talk to children, to work in a whole range of kind of different ways and reach people that maybe we wouldn't reach with a message of inclusion. So like, you know, today, ironically, today I was contacted about an event we held before lockdown anyway, and it was a Football versus Homophobia event that was hosted by a housing association. And it was a tournament in which loads of different housing associations put in teams. They had a great day of football, and we shared an anti-homophobia message throughout the day. And I just remember this guy coming up to me at the end of the day and just saying, "Oh, you know, that was amazing. I've had such a great day. And you know what? You've really made me think about stuff that I would never have thought about before, you know? And, you know, I just hadn't really thought about the things that, you know, you're talking about, that, you know, are on your leaflets, that I've seen today, the conversations we're having." And I think it's those kind of really unexpected wins that can be amazing in terms of football and social change, because that person, you know, it maybe wouldn't engage with our campaign or our message or issues around LGBTQ plus inclusion in anywhere else in their life, but they came to have a kickabout on that day, and it changed their mind, you know.
And Daniel, obviously, I know a lot of your work is very much around the inclusion, the accessibility, particularly in stadiums for disabled fans. But kind of on this question, I wonder, you know, some of the advancements and improvements we've seen around accessibility within football, can that kind of be used to highlight and as best practice in terms of things in society as well?
Yeah, for sure. I just realised I didn't get the memo about the black t-shirt. I'm here muggins by myself in a white shirt, but never mind. Yeah, so absolutely. We know that there are lots of clubs now who are starting to provide things like sensory rooms, for example, in their stadiums, which is obviously something that can really benefit maybe autistic supporters. And we've seen some of those rooms and facilities used for other things in the week as well. So we know, for example, a club just up the road from me, Watford Football Club, run a dementia awareness thing, or like a dementia sessions during the week for just people in the community to come along to engage. So yeah, different clubs starting to use their facilities, their services to benefit disabled people in society, mostly football lovers, but not necessarily exclusively so. But yeah, just by improving that accessibility to sports stadiums, obviously that benefits a huge number of people. There's the government statistics is that nearly a quarter of the UK population are disabled in some way. And so, you know, we need to be thinking quite broadly about how actually as a society we can be more inclusive to people who have different access requirements. And football is actually leading the way in many of those different areas. So it's good.
Brilliant. And Sandy, what are some of sort of successful initiatives that either you've run or you've seen that have used football to bring about social change, and how can other people or those listening replicate some of these initiatives and models?
Yeah, so it's a good question, and I would like to say the program Amnesty. Biased or unbiased, I'm not sure, but yeah, obviously at Amnesty International UK, we've got our football welcomes program, and there's like 3 key areas of it, but the main message around it is creating more welcoming communities for refugees and people who are seeking asylum. And the 3 areas are we've got our football welcomes community projects, we've got our football welcomes month, and we've got the women's football officer, which is obviously me. So within those 3 areas, there's activities that people can get involved in, clubs, county FAs, individuals, whoever it may be, get involved to empower and create these safe spaces for refugees and people who are seeking asylum. And it's successful in the fact that not only are we creating safe spaces and making people feel as if they belong within those spaces, but also then creating that integration with other parts of the club as well. So it's not completely segregated, it's kind of involved throughout the whole club, and the message is there throughout. But one of the key areas in terms of highlighting a success, I would say, is our Football Welcomes Month, which runs throughout the month of April each year, and it is to celebrate the contribution that refugees have had to the game of football, dating back to the Spanish Civil War. So every April, clubs get involved, county FAs, individuals, to show their support, and ways in which they can get involved. I mean, there's loads of ways. I'll only give a few examples, but you can post on social media, which obviously social media is a huge tool to be able to get your message across. So posting on social media, first teams wearing our Football Welcomes t-shirts, for example, on match days. Again, obviously, then taking photos, posting on social media, because then the fans will then look at that and be like, oh, what's Football Welcomes? Have a quick Google, and then bang, they've got the answer. So yeah, that's another way. Match day programs, posting on their websites, releasing press releases, interviews, hosting tournaments, you name it. You can do anything to be getting involved. So we've started in 2017. I wasn't around then at Amnesty. I've been at Amnesty for a couple of years. But in 2017, it started out with like 10 men's clubs and like no women's clubs at all. Fast forward to 2024, we're having around 200 clubs getting involved each April, which is amazing. And we're getting the numbers up in terms of the women's side as well, women's clubs. So it started off with 0 women in 2017, I think progressed to like 7 the year after, and then like 12. Like, it was very low numbers, and the last few years it's been from 68, and now I've managed to hit like 80 this year. So yeah, I would say that's definitely successful in creating more awareness, using high profile names within the game to get that message across as well. But yeah, so it's about, I guess, so we've got this program, successful program, but it's about other people being able to then kind of like see that, want to learn more about it, and then go on to create it as well. And I'm here for any of those questions for anyone that wants to do that.
Brilliant, sounds great. And when we kind of shift towards some of the challenges then in using football to promote social change, Lou, I wonder, are there any challenges that you come across within your organisation, the work that you do, and how did you overcome them?
Yeah, so I've been thinking about this, and I think like we've been around for quite a long time, I suppose. And so I think there's some sort of key general things. I think when you're the first people talking about a subject, that can be really difficult, because people aren't prepared for it. It's brand new, and and quite often I think people's initial response is to feel defensive, and that's something that I try really hard as a practitioner not to do when I'm challenged about stuff, and I am challenged about stuff, you know, fairly regularly. And you know, when you're working really hard to do something and then someone comes along and says, hey, you could be doing this loads better, it's really easy to think, hang on, I'm working really hard here, you know, look at all this great stuff I've done, rather than go, oh, okay, right, this is new information, this could improve, this could take me forward. So I think there's something there about, you know, having been the first people to talk about these issues back in the day, that was really difficult. It's also therefore really difficult to get any kind of investment, because people are like, what, why should we invest in LGBTQ plus inclusion in football? I mean, what does being gay or being trans have to do with football? Those were like genuine concerns and questions people had. So it was really difficult to kind of get momentum going, to get people to invest in the campaign, to get people to acknowledge that there was even an issue to start with, I think. And then I think the second thing for us, therefore, is because then we've been around for a really long time. Of course, one of the challenges is how you keep fresh, how you speak to a new generation. So, you know, you know, just things, you know, Sandy was talking about like high profile role models and all those kinds of things, which are just, you know, absolutely brilliant. I'm sure we all use them on this call, but it's about how quickly those high profile role models, you know, how we lose them. You know, if I talk to young people now and I say to them, you know, have you heard of the footballer Thomas Hitzlsperger? No, they haven't heard of Thomas Hitzlsperger. He's long gone, you know, and, you know, whereas I might, you know, so it's about kind of, it's about keeping ourselves fresh, keeping ourselves relevant, trying to speak to young people. And, you know, some of the ways that we've done that have been to engage a youth panel. So about 8 years ago, we launched the Football versus Homophobia youth panel. And I was so excited. I have to say, I was so excited when we launched it. And I thought, yeah, there's going to be these young people. They're going to just tell us that everything we do is just terrible. And, you know, we're not speaking to young people. And then we got this youth panel and they were just like, yeah, you're doing totally the right thing, but you just need to do more of it. And, you know, how can we help you do more of it? And how can we speak on behalf of the campaign? But yeah, I just think, you know, kind of touch points like that, you know, elevating voices, you know, a diversity of voices, so that you're keeping yourself relevant, is a huge challenge and really important to do.
Brilliant.
Can I jump in and add
Yes,
something? Is that okay? I would say, I think it relates to probably all of us, in the sense that not everyone is going to agree with you or your organization or your views, which obviously you would love for them to agree and obviously then want to get involved and support your campaign. But sometimes it can be difficult when the person on the other side of the screen or the other side of the table, wherever it may be, doesn't agree and doesn't think that it matters, like Lou was saying. But then also, like, why do we need to bring refugee or asylum seeking rights to football? But when you think about it, participating in physical activity is a basic human right. It's together, like one, you can't have one without the other, it's together. So it can be very difficult when you're in front of someone that doesn't agree. But how I would say I've overcome that, because unfortunately I have been in those situations with some big clubs that I won't be saying the names of, but I've been in those situations with people that don't really care. But how I've kind of overcome that, I would say, is, and other people may relate to this as well, I feel like there's always someone at a club or at an organization that cares. And I know it takes a lot of time and effort, but once you find that person, everything just falls into place and everything just clicks, because then you really have that person you can lean on and go back and forth with. And then suddenly the club that you thought wasn't going to support actually does, because they've got someone that's championing it from their side. So I would say to anyone listening that if there's someone that doesn't agree with you or agree with your campaign or whatever it may be, don't just stop there. There is going to be someone there that will agree and will help you push that like notion. But yeah, I just wanted to add that because I feel like all of us probably experienced that. Yeah.
Can I jump in as well, Jay? Sorry to drag as well, but I think it's starting small as well. One action can, you know, it's that consistency that you do that one action, whether that be a challenge, whether that be an event, and if you have one person or two people attend an event that hasn't really hit where you wanted it to hit, it's just continue with that consistency. And if that is an anti-racism message, a anti-homophobic message, or a human rights message, or disability inclusion messages, continuing with that message and drip feeding that how it looks is that consistency is really key. And I think, you know, we often hear, oh, politics should stay out of football. Well, everything's political these days. So, you know, using big role models, positive role models is really key. But also remembering that those community mentors, or, you know, your under sixes, under fives football coach, that's a positive role model to those group of players, whether they be from any background. So it's utilizing, usually high profile players, but also there's a lot of power for those volunteers that are supporting the football community. And, you know, not always those high profile players get it right. We've seen this with Argentina very recently. We know Liverpool under 18s have walked off the pitch twice at a tournament in Germany due to racist abuse. So there's not always positive role models at all levels that are acting in the correct manner. So it's really making sure that it's threaded through every single level of the game, no matter whether that's recreational, elite, that there's somebody supporting that message, and just continuing that message and that continued support is really key, I think.
We had a session, our first session to kick off the conference yesterday with Kelly Davis, was around being a change maker. And it's very much that, Dean, you know, while all of you use high profile players and clubs to share key messages and sort of create that awareness raising. But essentially, you know, every single person who's listening to this session can be a role model and can have a huge influence within their own social circles, within their own communities as well. And I think one thing that I think we've lost as a society is that ability to have genuine debates in a psychologically safe environment. And while, as you were saying, Sandy, there, you know, might be somebody who disagrees with your attitudes or views, or vice versa, it's having that opportunity to discuss that and to share, you know, each other's point of views, your thoughts, feelings, backing it with facts and figures, and trying to dismantle any stereotypes or misconceptions that might, you know, exist in a person's attitude, but doing it in a safe way, because, you know, as we've already said, as soon as you start really challenging, as you experienced, Lou, when the campaign first started, you get that defensiveness and kind of suddenly people are shut down, and it's always difficult then to try and influence somebody or to change them, or to get to really think about their own attitudes and views and where they might have got that information from as well. But anybody can have the ability to influence somebody and give them education and insights to try and get them to think differently, you know, essentially create a better society and a more inclusive and welcoming sport, but society as well. Daniel, coming over to you. Now, within football then, we know that football still has a long way to go to improve in terms of accessibility for disabled fans and players as well. But what are some of the steps that are currently being taken to address these?
If you don't mind, I'll just come in on the barrier side of things as well first, if that's okay, and then I can move on to some of those, just because there's a couple of additional things in relation to disability that are slightly different possibly to a couple of the ones that have been mentioned already. So obviously disabled people still often face the same kind of attitude barriers that have just been talked about. We've been hearing a lot about some of the online discrimination and the fact that a lot of the sort of the disability slurs and terminology aren't really taken that seriously. Oftentimes they're used as throwaway comments, and, you know, sadly in society they're quite common, with people not really thinking that much about them. Kick It Out recently talked about a massive increase in the amount of disability abusive language and terminology, sadly, that's being used. And from our own surveys, we've seen a huge or a year-on-year increase in that, which has contributed to over a quarter of fans saying that the attitudes of other people is a barrier to them attending live sport. But obviously on top of that kind of attitude barriers, there's obviously the physical barriers as well. So for a lot of disabled people, there's the, you know, the actual physical infrastructure that's in place, which is oftentimes either outdated or just leaves disabled people feeling like they're second-class citizens or a nuisance in some way. And so for many, it's, you know, a case of actually they can't even get to the game in the first place, or get to participate in sport, because it's just they haven't been considered at the point of the design, or at the point of that kind of service being designed, really. So there's that. And then in terms of you know, the other forms of potential discrimination, things around like travel to matches, and things around ticketing and the cost of attending, these things as well can be a significant barrier for many disabled people attending. There's research that actually life costs more for disabled people in general. Scope of research that is about £1,000 a month more for disabled people just in terms of everyday living. There are additional costs. So things like going to live sport can be expensive, and particularly if they need support of somebody else there, or equipment or other things, and those are not provided. So there's kind of all these things. I mean, by talking about some of those challenges, obviously some of the solutions are evident. You know, we're wanting clubs to obviously take some of these barriers seriously. Many of them do work with us really well to try and help to remove those barriers. Sadly, there are still lots of clubs who just don't engage with us. They maybe say, well, our stadium's just too old, there's nothing we can do, and just kind of throw their hands up and try and bury their head in the sand about it, or ignore us. But yeah, thankfully many clubs do engage with us and try and say, well, how can we improve our accessibility? How can we make sure that we've got, you know, level access? I mentioned about sensory rooms, things like changing places facility, which is a specific type of accessible toilet, obviously accessible parking. All these are a different kind of services and facilities that can benefit disabled fans. Having like audio descriptive commentary. So yeah, there's lots of different things that clubs are kind of starting to roll out and implement that they can actually make a massive difference for disabled people when attending live sport. And it's not doing something, you know, extra or special. It's basically just meeting people's basic requirements for them to be able to access and enjoy the games in the same way as others. So I don't know if that answered your question. Apologies. So was that your original question?
Yeah, no, and you're right, and I think, you know, it highlights that while there are still significant barriers for many people in place, I suppose it's positive to see many clubs, and most clubs, but like you said, not everyone, kind of really taking more of a proactive step in trying to tackle some of those barriers, and you know, some of the work that we've done with our international games over the last few years, just seeing the real impact it has on individuals and their lives. You know, I remember a few years back when we started doing audio descriptive commentary for the first time, and speaking to one of the first users of that service that since you know, sort of losing their sight many years ago, hadn't been to a Wales game for, you know, over a decade, and just having that sort of provision in place allowed them to come back to the stadium and experience that. And you know, it was a really heartfelt moment to see that such a simple initiative, the impact it can have on someone's life as well. So certainly some key things there, Daniel, to think about.
A lot of the times that clubs think that all the changes they would need to make are just way too expensive or way too difficult to implement, but they're not always. There's oftentimes just very simple, straightforward, inexpensive changes that can make a huge difference to people's lives. So yeah,
definitely. Neil, coming over to you, how can campaigns help to change attitudes towards LGBTQ individuals, both within football, within the game, and society as well?
I think one of the things that's kind of quite unique about football or sport in general for the LGBTQ plus community is that it's a super gendered environment. And so when people say, oh, you know, football reflects society, what we would say is that football magnifies society. So, for example, you know, a young person that I spoke to years ago about their experience in school sport and PE. And they were talking about having a really difficult time. And I said, you know, and I basically said, are you saying that homophobia is worse in a kind of PE environment? And this young man said to me, yeah, you know, it totally is. You know, if you're gay in maths, no one cares if you're gay in maths. But if you're gay in football, it's not just, you know, you trying to drive the other team into the ground. It's your own team trying to drive you into the ground. And I think that, you know, that is you know, there is something unique about football environments. You know, we know through research, for example, that young people, that society, you know, young people are generally much more accepting of LGBTQ plus people, you know, generationally. Younger people, millennials, Gen Z, are much more accepting. And yet we know that homophobic slurs are go-to kind of banter in men's football still, you know, and so whilst attitudes have changed, environments and behavior hasn't necessarily changed in the way that we see that it's changed in other areas of society. And then, you know, not only just to talk about the men's game, but, you know, in the women's game, you know, there can be a lot of kind of gender policing because it's a gendered environment, and that has an impact not only, you know, on girls and women in general, but can particularly have an impact on kind of queer women, non-binary people, and particularly trans women as well. So I think that there are these unique kind of situations, but what that affords us is an opportunity to work in a way, in a kind of very magnified way, that then has an impact on wider society. So it's almost as if you get it right in football, then you can get it right almost anywhere, you know. So football is really worth it as a battleground, I think. And I think, you know, if we look at, not to get party political, but if we look at the previous UK government, for example, that is why one of the reasons that there was so much targeting of like sports like cricket and football around trans inclusion, because that speaks to the wider kind of trans debate and the, you know, and the culture war around trans inclusion that currently the UK is engaged in. So yeah, I feel like, you know, football can be a very tough environment to work in, but if you know, you can massively reap rewards in football as well.
And as you said, with football being such a global sport, and then one sport in the world, and seeing some of the billions of people that can watch some of the major tournaments, that simple messaging and key things and players having that vocal support, we're seeing more and more of that now, players becoming more comfortable with speaking out around certain political issues or human rights issues as well. You know, it can really play a key role in trying to tackle in some of those sort of anti-LGBTQ attitudes in society as well.
Absolutely, and have a massive impact on things like, you know, feelings of isolation. So you talk to, you know, you listen to footballers who've come out as gay or bisexual, and the stories they're able to tell about young people who've reached out to them, who've said, I never felt I could be myself in the game. You know, there's just so much power, you know, in football and in those role models. And I absolutely agree. I think it was Dean's point, you know, that, yeah, there are icons of the game and those people are incredibly impactful. But actually, we also need to be looking at the role models within our own communities, and empowering ourselves to make a difference. Because as soon as, you know, you're a member of a club, you have a badge, you know, on your chest, or you know, you put on a coaching kit, you know, you become a role model and you have the capacity for change 100%.
Just a reminder for everyone listening in, make sure you get your questions in for the end, just as a reminder for that. So Dean, obviously the campaign uses footballers and clubs to sort of spread that anti-racism message. How do you engage with players and clubs within your campaign and the work that you do? And what impact does their involvement have?
Yeah, players are a huge part of Choice in My Card. You know, we were started 28 years ago by Shaka Hislop after he was experienced a racist incident at a petrol station, and the young people that were racially abusing him changed their attitudes when they realised that he was the goalkeeper for their favourite football team. So it's using that platform and pedestal that people put footballers on to really change narratives. We know that, you know, players taking the knee, yes, it did get booed and there were some negatives around that, but actually even that booing opened the opportunity to have a conversation around race and racism, which didn't happen before. And I think, you know, we engage footballers through a variety of ways. So for me, a footballer is anybody that takes part in any form of the game. So, you know, for our month of action, which, you know, is funded by yourselves at the FAW, where we're asking clubs to sign up and hold up cards and share their message of anti-racism on social media, again, is raising awareness of racism in the game, but opening those conversations. Well, actually, what does anti-racism mean? What does that look like in the game of football? And we know if we, similar to Lou's point, if we can get it right in football, that's being drip fed into society and wider society. So, you know, our month of action does engage with grassroots clubs, but also professional clubs. So we'll do things with the Cymru Premier, the Adran Premier, where teams will wear our T-shirts and share anti-racism message through PA system, through their you know, their programs on a match day. But then also using players initiatives like our iftar events, which we've completed at Cardiff City and Swansea City over the recent years, which is the celebration of breaking fast during the month of Ramadan for those for Muslim people, and that's really important, that it's bringing not just the individuals from the community that are Muslim, but also non-Muslim people together to break down some of those misconceptions about Islam, bringing communities together. I know we've worked with Amnesty in the past as well around their football welcomes campaign, where, you know, they came and spoke about what that campaign's about. So again, using players at those events, of seeing players on stage that actually not all the fans knew were actually Muslim, and talking about their journey of their religion through their footballing lives, again, is able to bring people together and relate to them. So celebrate difference but similarities as well. And then also we've got you know, we do club days at football clubs across Wales and the UK, but obviously with our role within Wales, it's club days where there'll be anti-racism education for young people at football clubs, and then question and answer with players where they're able to share some of their expertise around the positive nature of diversity within the changing rooms. And that's across both the, you know, the women's and the female game within Wales, which is massively growing. It's great to see that now. That's the first thought, is, have we got gender balance when we're looking at panels, which we're talking about? Are we having experiences from everybody within the game? And that's kind of a highlight of clubs now coming to us and saying, we really want to do more club days, or we really want to, what's happening when's the next iftar event? How can we support? What does that look like? How can we have working groups? So it's that drip feeding and starting using players, but ultimately once those players have been involved, there's legacy as well, because it's been seen, and that's then passed down to future players, academy players, and people throughout the pathway, including grassroots. And it's really important to have those players supporting across all levels of the game.
And as Lou mentioned earlier, you know, football can be a real kind of inroad and a hook in for many young people to open up these wider discussions around the various areas that all of your campaigns are working, and those key sort of educative and awareness messages. And on Lou's point earlier, Dean, I think Shaka Hislop will probably be thankful for the organisation's work, because many young people is aware of who Shaka Hislop is. Certainly remember seeing him when I was younger playing as well. Sandy, coming back to you now, I know you've already shared some of the initiatives you've done, the impact they've had. But can you sort of share some other impact of high sort of profile football campaigns on human rights issues, such as some of the ones that you've led in? I know you mentioned a couple, but anything kind of even more globally around you know, raising awareness at least of some of the global human rights issues?
Yeah, definitely. So I just want to also say that I agree with what everyone else has said, in the sense that it's not just high profile players that we need to be engaging with, it's definitely grassroots level too. And the reason why I say that as well is because at Amnesty we have a women's football leadership program that I lead, and I mentor refugee women to become future leaders in general, whether that's in football, communities, whatever it may be. And they will be going on to be activists, campaigners, whatever it may be. So yeah, it's definitely not just high profile players. But in regard to this question specifically, with it being high profile campaigns, obviously it's important to be getting high profile players or just people in general getting involved and using their voice and their platform to create that positive change. But obviously, as I mentioned before in the previous answers, that football clubs are at the heart of many different communities, and it is a great way of bringing people together. So it's the perfect tool to be able to use to campaign. But one key example, obviously, how clubs are creating more awareness is, as I mentioned, our Football Welcomes campaign and our Football Welcomes program. But with that being said, football has played a pivotal role for fighting against discrimination. With that being said, though, we obviously do have a long way to go. But for example, like racism, sexism, homophobia, and standing up for the rights as well of workers who are building stadiums. So like last year in Qatar, vocalizing around workers' rights, as well as also highlighting Marcus Rashford, or should I say Sir Marcus Rashford, during the pandemic, standing up for the right for food, or Gary Lineker advocating for refugee rights. But even as well, currently, I've been a part of conversations within Amnesty, and even currently with the Olympics and Paralympic Games, how it's being shouted about the fact that it's the first year where there's an equal gender balance of athletes, which is amazing, don't get me wrong. But with that being said, they forget to mention, or maybe not forget to mention, purposely don't mention that women who wear a hijab are banned from representing France. So yes, it's amazing to have a year at the Olympics, Paralympics, that there's that gender balance, fantastic, but you are leaving out a big group of people that cannot represent their country because they can't wear the headscarf. So obviously the practice of sport is a basic human right, as I mentioned before. So campaigning around this basic human right can put pressure on authorities and this, therefore hopefully lift this ban, which is obviously what is happening at the moment. So hopefully things will change in regard to that. But yeah, football and then obviously sport in general has really played and will continue to play a pivotal role in advocating for human rights issues, and obviously globally too.
Again, you know, it's so important that the more people we have as kind of activists and speaking out and kind of using their voice or their platform is so important. And I wonder, kind of, Lou, what advice would you sort of give, or kind of any actions really for individuals to kind of take a stance to support and sort of promote the use of football, to try and sort of, you know, raise awareness of various human rights issues, or tackle sort of social change issues?
Well, I think the first thing I want to do is just talk a bit, just mention intersectionality here, because I think that, you know, it's really interesting hearing Sandy talk about the hijab ban in France. And kind of before Amnesty and those other really large organizations kind of got on board with that, a lot of the campaigning in France was being done by a women's football team called Les Hijabeuses, and they were really significantly supported by a queer women's football team called Les Dégameuses in France as well, who were really, really committed to the human rights of women to wear the veil. And I think that that is kind of really, really, really powerful, and you know, and just something that's worth mentioning, and that for us not to forget that we are all human rights activists on this call, and that all of our issues affect each other, you know, and that the beauty of intersectionality is having a lens that you know, that considers everybody's issues, the way those issues interact with each other, but also to make sure that nobody's left behind as well. So what's the point of us being anti-homophobia if we're then really ableist? And for, you know, for example, you know, allow our followers to use ableist slurs on social media when they're criticizing someone's homophobia. You know, these things are really, really important for us to consider. So just wanted to say that. And then I suppose the thing that I want to say to people on this call is mainly, don't do nothing. You know, it can be really easy in the world in which we live in, where we are bombarded with different issues every day. There's so much going on at the moment in the world, and that can feel really, really overwhelming. But there's always something we can do, and there's always something that we can do in our own communities as well. And I think that it's really important that people own their place in the game. You know, so, you know, if you are a coach, if you are, you know, a volunteer in football, you know, think about your power and the impact that you can have on the people around you. Because actually, with some quite small changes, you can create a space in which people can be their authentic selves in the game, you know, or, you know, I don't want to speak for other people on the call, but, you know, make some physical changes. Maybe then disabled people will be able to come to your ground, you know, make some cultural changes, and, you know, LGBTQ plus people will feel that they belong and that they've got a place there. And I just think about what difference you can personally make.
I just wanted to jump in there, sorry, actually, as well, because Lou, you mentioned obviously intersectionality, and it's something that I talk about all the time to everyone, my friends, people that I work with, whoever it may be. And it was something that I wanted to highlight too, because we're obviously all talking about different identities, but they all combine as well for individuals too. But anyone that is on the call, I'm conscious that some people may have not heard the term before. But I would really like emphasize and put an emphasis on go out and do your research on it, what it means, how it relates to society in general, but obviously then relating to sport and your programs, your participants, whatever it may be, because you need to understand intersectionality to be able to understand your participants. But with that being said, for anyone who potentially doesn't know what intersectionality is on the call, yeah, Lou, I hope you don't mind me going into it a little bit more. But just in case people on the call don't know, it is a term coined by Dr. Kimberly Crenshaw in the 1980s, specifically 1989, and it's a term used to identify overlapping or intersecting social identities that combine to create different modes of discrimination or privilege within society. So just keep that in mind in terms of your programs, but I'll stop talking now because I just wanted to add that.
No, thanks for clarifying that, Sandy. And no doubt there will be some people that concept will certainly be new to them. And I think it's both really important points from both of you there. I think, you know, this area of work is not a competition. And while I completely understand that many people will have their own lived experiences and their own specific identities or discrimination that they might face, you know, when we're looking at football and society as well, it's widened a little bit. But if we're talking about we want to create a game that everybody can have the opportunity to participate in and have that environment where they're included and feel that they belong, I think that it's so important that for everyone on the call and people who are passionate about equality, diversity, inclusion, and you know, people being the best version of themselves and having an opportunity, is that you can't just focus on your one area of work, whether it be, you know, ethnicity or LGBTQ or whatever it might be, or disability. You know, you have to kind of broaden it out, because actually everything that we're talking about here, whether it's the work that Dean does at Shirota Card or Lou does at Football versus Homophobia, actually all of the things often benefit everyone. And it's the same with disability, Daniel. Last night we had a session on inclusive communications, and actually everything on there, while it was geared to somebody who might be dyslexic or dyspraxia or whatever it might be, but actually the things that benefit everybody. I'm sure we've all been in a situation with a PowerPoint presentation that's got tiny text, or the color colour contrast is quite right. You can't really read it. So, you know, even if you're neurotypical, you know, those changes and those things that can be put in place can benefit everyone. And I think it's so important that, you know, we can't just focus on one area. It's something that we need to be passionate and speak out about every injustice and sort of human rights as well.
If I can comment on that, I mean, that ties in with something that literally we've just put out a statement today about digital ticketing. So, you know, there's often an expectation within football that a one-size-fits-all policy will work for everyone, and a lot of the times it doesn't work like that. So, you know, there's lots of people who won't have access to certain technologies. For example, they may not have access to a smartphone or a bank card, for example, if it's, you know, if cashless stadiums are becoming the new kind of thing. But actually, for many fans maybe who have a learning disability, they may not have access to a bank card, or some elderly people may not, you know, have a smartphone. Digital ticketing may not be something they can use, and clubs often can then end up charging them more to have a physical ticket, rather than just actually making that allowance and saying, okay, we appreciate that this isn't working for everybody. And as you say, just making those changes. And websites is another big one. You mentioned about color contrast, screen reader, all that kind of accessible tools are things that clubs should be starting to think about. Actually, we need to make sure that disabled fans can get the information that they need, can purchase tickets in the way they need, can actually get to the games in the way that they need.
I think a big thing, if I can jump in, Jace, is listening to people and actioning it. And at points, you are going to get it wrong. But it's what you do once you've got it wrong, of actually making sure that you don't make that mistake again and move forward, apologize, own your mistake, and actually listen to you know, your participants or people that aren't participating or aren't accessing, you know, your whatever form of football it is, to make sure that you can make those amendments. Often they can be small. Sometimes they have to be slightly bigger, but really making sure that when we do listen, we do everything within our powers to make it that inclusive space, to move forward and lean on people. If there's, you know, there's something you really need to go and lean on the experts, try and educate yourself, but reach out, because we're here as a support mechanism for the football family. And I think that's really key, that, you know, use us, and that's the aim of our organizations, is to move everybody forward on their journey of inclusion within football and in society.
Brilliant. We're just coming towards the end of the session. Just a quick reminder to everyone listening in to get your questions in. So we'll have a little bit of time to answer a couple of questions. But just very quickly, to come around everybody, just as a bit of a wrap up, what is the one kind of key message that you'd like to leave everyone here listening to this session? One key message or a call to action that you'd like to leave them regarding the use of football as a vehicle for social change. So come to you, Sandy, first.
Okay, I'll try to keep this short and sweet. I would say, obviously, as we know, some of us on the call know that some programs can be hard to get off the ground, but it's important to know that what you're doing is important. Like Lou said, like it's better to do something than nothing, right? So if you can have a positive effect, let's say on one person, as much as that may feel disheartening because you expected potentially 10 people at your session that you just launched, just remember you still had that impact on that one person that you wouldn't have had if you didn't start. So I would just say, don't be disheartened, keep on driving for that change, because it's important what you're all doing.
And Lou?
Yeah, I think that's a really good point from Sandy about, you know, things change starts in a small way, you know, and change happens in communities. You know, it's kind of really easy to think, oh, you know, LGBTQ plus human rights in the UK have changed because we've had Stonewall as a kind of charity that have driven that change. And on some levels, they've driven policy change, but cultural change has happened because of conversations that LGBTQ plus people have had with their friends, with their families, with their football coaches, you know, with the people around them, with people in supermarkets, you know, for many years. And it's been the work of individual people that has really driven change, kind of hand in hand with some of that larger policy change. certainly in the UK. So I think, yeah, just for me, it's really about kind of owning your power, knowing that you can do something, and just one thing would be good.
And Daniel?
Yeah, I'll answer the question with just an example. So we saw on social media, this was from a couple of years ago, somebody who was colorblind posted a photo which was a simulation of what they were able to see. And there were two teams playing football, and one was wearing a red kit, one was wearing a black kit, but the two kits look identical in this colorblind simulation. And sadly, the comments in the reply to that tweet were basically just saying, you know, why should we have to do anything to change? This is this person's problem. This is, you know, there's always something to complain about. Who cares? So my encouragement to you is don't have that attitude. There are things that we can do as a society to actually make it more inclusive for everyone, and so often those are just very small things, and oftentimes they're just changes of attitudes. So yeah, if you see examples of discrimination, outright discrimination, call it out. But if you see ways in which actually venues and places can be more inclusive in the way they design things, let them know and help them to make those changes. So, but yeah, be advocates for disabled people.
Brilliant. And Dean, last but not least.
I think it'd be, again, similar message where change starts with you. So sometimes hold that mirror up instead of looking out the window and pointing the finger. So can you educate yourself and do everything within your powers as a starting to change, make societal change? And if you can't do it yourself, how are we expecting others to do it? So making sure that we're educating ourselves, listening, but then really, you know, change starts with ourselves.
Brilliant. So we've had one or two questions coming. I'm conscious of time, but we got a little bit of time into the break. Should imagine it'd be fine. So how would you challenge those in grassroots clubs at committee level who refuse to accept discrimination within their club? Dean, don't know whether you want to pick up on that one, maybe?
I think it's looking at the policy and using the powers that be, you know, whether that be reporting into Jason, show Jason red card, and looking at, you know, if it is committee level, what is the procedure in the club for challenging that and escalating it to the appropriate channel? That could be your league association, it could be the FAW, and looking at what we can do to action that and support. I think, yeah, you know, a way to challenge is reporting. I think that's really key, that, you know, we're reporting into the appropriate channel, and also chasing that up and speaking to people, informing people of what you've done in the process, and asking where it is. You know, the process, there are difficulties with some of the processes of people coming back, and we know it's not perfect. And I know ourselves with the FAW of kind of working hard to adapt and make sure that the processes for reporting discrimination are as good as they can be. There's always room for improvement, we know that, but it's making sure you follow those procedures, but also then, you know, chasing up and saying, you know, is there any movement on this? And if you're not getting an answer, then it's escalated to the next level. But yeah, please do challenge and use the experts that you can on the procedures to escalate that further up the chain.
Thanks, Ian. Final question, one for you, maybe Lou, to pick up on. So we've seen a lot of players now, particularly you know, high profile players, move into countries and leagues in Saudi Arabia, for example. We obviously seen the World Cup was in Qatar, and what we know, kind of the widespread discussions that sort of took place around some of that. So kind of the question is around, you know, are these controversial moves for players to be moving over there, even though maybe individuals might have previously supported LGBTQ rights, and now therefore are kind of being rejected then by those that the player was trying to support previously, even if it was well intended to maybe go over try and challenge some human rights and attitudes. What's your thoughts around that, Lou, briefly?
Yeah, I saw the question in the Q&A. I mean, I think the thing that I think about that is I cannot believe that, like, you know, the particular player that was mentioned, I cannot believe that their agent didn't do some kind of risk assessment around their reputation before they made that move. And I think, you know, we're seeing, you know, the world is a very big place, and LGBTQ plus human rights are not equal around the world. And in many countries, you know, homosexuality or being trans is criminalized in some way. And I think that, you know, I think that footballers now, you know, high profile footballers now have resources available to them to understand the implications of decisions that they make, you know, in their lives, and you know, the choices that they make. And I would just say, you know, what I would say to footballers is, you know, think about the decisions that you're making, and think about the ramifications of those things, because, you know, the decisions you make do have an impact on your fan base, you know, and we see that around a range of issues, not just issues that are to do with human rights. So yeah, I think, you know, football is a global game, and people need to think globally about it and think about the impact of their actions, really.
I think it's quite a kind of good one to finish on, because, you know, everything we spoke about tonight around football being a vehicle for social change, you know, let's hope that globally, with many human rights issues, that the football could be the leading light to really challenge some of those issues in the long run, with, you know, football and these high profile players going to many different countries now, and hopefully speaking out, which is what we've all said is the key thing for everyone here. And every one of us has a responsibility to speak out when we believe in something and we see that something is not right, and certainly doesn't sit with our values, and what we believe in as well. So, you know, hopefully in the long run, maybe football can be that tool to bring about social change across the world. That brings us to the end of the session. Just want to say a huge thank you to our guests tonight, Sandy, Lou, Dean and Daniel. Now, for those that are listening live, we will share with you the contact details and the website of each of the organisations on here tonight. For those that are watching back, in the comment section down below, you'll have the links to each of the organisations on here to find out some more information, and more importantly, find out how you can get involved as an individual or as your club when each of the campaigns work. And thank you again for everyone that has joined this evening.